Today I'm going to be sharing my June Smart Art Box project. This box has a lot of stuff in it. Hi, I'm Lisa, the artist behind Lachri Fine Art. If you are unfamiliar with what the Smart Art Box is, it is a monthly subscription box where every month you get a box full of full-size art supplies with everything you need, including instructions on how to complete your own box. This video is being sponsored by Smart Art Box. One of my favorite things about this box is the brochure that it comes in. It is a really nice one that goes over the history of the style that you are going to be working in. You get some project pointers, you get some tips on the supplies that you're using, and a list of all of the supplies, and then on the back you get step-by-step instructions on how to complete your own project. So if it's something you've never worked in before, you're not going to feel totally lost. And actually, at the time of me recording this intro, I have not yet done my project. I'm pretty excited about it. This is not something I've ever done before. So let's go ahead and take a look at what came in my box. So taking a look inside, first we've got the brochure, which we have already gone over. We have a 6 by 14 inch burlap sheet. Next, we have a palette and palette knife set. After that, we have a mini canvas and frame set. This is 3 by 3 inches. That looks fun. Next, we have an Art Alternatives 10-piece brush set. These are Taklon bristled brushes. And we've got a pound of Activa Art Plaster. This you end up with a lot of extra, so you can make several projects out of this one box. And here is a 24 set of Royal Langnickle acrylic paints. That has a lot of colors in it. And that is it for this box. So starting off, I've got my burlap down and I'm going to pour the plaster right on top of that. Notice I put something underneath it to protect it, because if you may get a little bit that spills through onto whatever is underneath. So I just used a piece of tinfoil. With this, it is 2 parts plaster to 1 part water, and you're just going to stir that up until it's a pretty thick consistency. I'm then just going to use the palette knife to spread that around. Now when you clean this out, you do not want to clean the palette knife directly into your sink because you don't really want plaster in your pipes. So with this, I just wiped it off on a damp paper towel and threw that in the trash. So I'm going to go ahead and smooth that out. I'm okay with there being some strokes here where you can see where the palette knife moved through. I don't need this to be 100% flat. And you can shape this however you want. You can get to where you're really picky, where you've got a perfect rectangle. In my case, I wanted this much looser feel, a more natural kind of, well, like I poured plaster onto a burlap sack and just let it set there. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten that out a little bit more. And you can leave this where it's got a little bit more of a rough texture, or you can smooth it out like I've done here, or smooth it out even more. There's no definite right or wrong, it's just how you want your project to look. I let that dry for about 20 minutes, just so that it was dry enough to paint on. I don't want it completely dry because you want the acrylic paint to bond to the actual plaster. That's the goal here, why we're painting on plaster and not letting it dry all the way. So once I let that dry for about 20 minutes, I went ahead and mixed some acrylic paint. I've got a combination of phthalo blue. I've got a little bit of a phthalo green. I think it's actually Viridian green, but close to phthalo, mixed in with that. And I'm going to fade from light blue at the top down to the darker blue for this underwater scene. And I've never painted on this surface, this type of surface before. It was actually really fun because it is so smooth. So blending was really easy. You don't need to put very much paint out. A little bit actually goes a pretty long way. I put way more out than what I needed. I think the box recommended using about a 1/4 size, and that seems to be a good way to go. Definitely wasted some paint here. So I'm just going to keep blending that back and forth. I'm using a larger flat brush out of the set. Getting all those edges, making sure I've got all the white covered up. going to want to start putting in white streaks for the shimmering water surface. Switch to a smaller brush. That bigger one is a little hard to control for thinner lines. Got some squiggles there. And I tried putting rays of light coming down and didn't really like how it looked, so I just blended over it. All of this paint stayed wet for a fairly long time, long enough that I was able to easily blend over it without messing anything up when I later decided that I didn't like these rays of light coming through. And they're just straight lines coming out from that water surface. And they're optional. I mean, if you want rays of light, that is how I would still recommend doing them for painting with these supplies. But I just didn't really like how it looked. So there's me sitting there contemplating whether or not I want those rays of light to stay there. I'm going to go ahead and rinse that brush out. Remember, don't leave your acrylic brushes sitting in water. Just rinse them off and set them to the side. So I went back to that larger brush, and it's a little bit damp from the water still, and I'm just working right over where I put those rays of light to tone those down. It's not sopping wet. It just has it's just a little bit damp. You can see I was able to work most of those out. Now I just have a hint of the rays of light coming through, which is much better for what I wanted. Rinsing that brush out. Now I left my project on the burlap because if you move plaster or any type of cement type thing, if you move it too soon, you can actually cause it to crack and then have to start over again with that project. So I just left it there for several hours until it was completely dry, just to be safe. And it did stick to the burlap a little bit, but it pulled off okay. So now I'm going to use some black and start painting in my orca. Using a smaller brush, and I'm just going to line that out first. Now, if you're not comfortable painting straight onto your project, you can draw it out onto a piece of tracing paper and then use transfer paper to transfer the image onto your project. So if you're more comfortable that way, keeping everything clean, that's a really good way to go too. I'm drawing the outline of the whale's body. And this is not something where I'm going photorealistic, obviously. I just want it to look like a whale. Or an orca, I should say. If I wanted to go photorealistic, I would probably use a charcoal pencil and sketch that out before I started painting straight onto the project. Or, like I said, use tracing and transfer paper to transfer the image onto the project. I'm mixing a little bit of water in with my paint so that it is a thinner consistency. Not a ton. I don't want it to be really runny. So then now that I have my general shape of the whale, I can go ahead and start filling him in. Now, the thing to notice here is that I am not just going to paint him solid black and white. I'm using some black, but I'm actually going to use far more of the blue that I used in the water, and I want to make sure that I fade this from the dark on the bottom edge of his body up to the lighter blue. Because he's underwater, I want to make it look like he's underwater, not like he's just a sticker of a whale that is stuck on top of my background. So as I go through here, notice how much blue I start pulling into this. And the same thing when I start working on the white portions of the whale, they're not going to be solid white. You're going to have the tint of water right over that. So mixing those colors there a little bit, getting that lighter blue. Again, just using the same exact colors I used in the background. And the brush that I'm using here is fairly big. If you want to be a bit more precise, you can use a smaller brush. I'm okay with there being a few brush strokes, but I do want to smooth most of them out. And I'm just working that paint right back and forth between the light and the dark so that they blend together. Right now that's a bit too dark, so I'm going to pull some more lighter colors into that. Now let that fade down into the black. Rinsing some of the paint off the brush, I had gotten to where I was lifting so much of the black from the whale that I was getting too much gray. So I went ahead and rinsed that off, and I'm going to reload my brush with more of the light blue, painting in the white portions of the whale. And again, here, notice that it's not just solid white, it's just the light blue. I'm going to use that same color to pull in some highlights on the black portions of this guy. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush to paint in the rays of light that are on his back, or her back. Adding a little bit of water to it. And again, going with the light blue. Oh, I guess I'm going to sign it first. As usual, I'm backwards. I don't know why I always sign my name before I finish the piece. So here are those rays of light. You want to make sure that these are curved. If you just do straight lines going across his back, it makes him look very flat. So notice how those lines are all slightly curved around his body. That gives him a more three-dimensional feel. I'm going to add a couple of light dots for, well, more than a couple, for some bubbles in the water, just to catch that movement there. Whenever I paint bubbles, I'm going to paint them in clumps and clusters, not just random polka dots everywhere. Group those up. And that is really it for this one. Very, very quick, very simple project that has a very fun finished look. And as you'll see on the final photo of this, you can really see how much texture is still in that plaster. You can see all of the strokes that I made with the palette knife. So it looked like it was more flat than it really was, but you get a lot of texture here in the surface that you're painting on. But it was still pretty easy to paint on because even though I had that texture in there, it was still very smooth. It's such a contradiction, but it really was a lot of fun to paint on. Really fun project. If you want to sign up to get your own smart art box, I have a coupon code in the description box below that will give you a discount off your subscription for life, along with all of the countries that this box is available in. Thanks for watching. Have you subscribed yet? If not, I have a handy button right there. It's round, has an orange arrow going to it. If you click on that, that'll help you to keep up to date with all 5 of my new art videos every single week, except for June because I was sick. There were very few videos in June.